The first plenary session of today's event is Demystifying Climate Action. This session will contemplate how the RMG industry of Bangladesh can meet the imperatives of global demand of climate action while continuing the sustainable growth trajectory. The session will cover importance of knowledge and awareness, collaboration, policy, and shared responsibilities of the supply chain actors in achieving the global science-based target initiative of keeping the emission limited to level that limit the global warming within 1.5 degrees. Now I'm requesting the moderator of this session, Mr. Asif Ibrahim, Chairman of UNESCAP Sustainable Business Network Task Force on Disaster and Climate Risk Reduction, Chairman of Chittagong Stock Exchange and Director of BGMEA Speaker, Ms. Lindita Zaferi Salihu, Sectors Engagement Lead, UNFCCC, will join us virtually. Professor Salimul Haq, Director of International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICCCAD, and Professor of Independent University of Bangladesh, Mr. Rene Van Berkel, Representative and Head of Regional Office in India, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, Ms. Noreen Chaudhry, Senior Program Manager, Lotus Foundation, and Ms. Masarat Kadir, Regional Public Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement Manager of H&M Group, to please come up on stage and take their seats.
Thank you. Welcome to the plenary session 1 of the Sustainable Apparel Forum. The presenter has already given you a background of this particular session, and it is one of the key important sessions when we talk about sustainability and the future and the overall sustainable development goals that all the countries in the world have signed up to. This session we will, in summary, talk about the role of the manufacturers, the proactive role in reducing the overall carbon footprint. We will talk about business efficiency for climate risk reduction. A lot of projects, initiatives are being taken, so we will hear some of them from our distinguished panelists. And also process innovation for green manufacturing. Since the panelists have already been introduced, I would not like to waste much time. I'm going to go straight into the questions because we are already a little bit behind starting the event. My first question is, has Lindita joined virtually? Is she available online? Is Lindita online? Oh, okay, there you are. Yeah, I can see you there. A very good morning from Bangladesh. The question to you is, one of the major goals of UNFCCC is to achieve net zero by 2050, in line with keeping the global warming below 1.5 degrees. Have you been able to estimate the investment requirements of the fashion industry to achieve this goal? And how can brands invest in its supply chain to achieve the common goal across the entire supply chain? So over to you, Lindita. If we can have her in the screen behind us as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. It's really a pleasure to be part of Sustainable Apparel Forum. To go back to your question, I think the critical temperature goal to limit the global temperature rise as close as possible to 1.5 degrees reflects not just this scientific reality, but also a vision of the future that we need, because it compels us to rethink the way we produce, the way we use and consume energy, how we manufacture and how we build and how we manage our land and our ecosystems. And I think, of course, all of the audience there knows this very well, that to create the change that is needed towards a more sustainable, more resilient and low emission future, it is really critical that the right policies are put in place now and as quickly as possible, so that technologies that will ensure that can develop, can mature, can become commercialized, and so forth. Now, certainly finance is a key component as well. As you will probably know, it is also a key issue under the UNFCCC processes. But to go back to your question, I think we've seen some analysis that has recently come up on industry decarbonization investments, not just the fashion industry, that may be required to finance to $170 billion by 2025 and $360 billion by 2040. So if we look at industry overall, global industry, this is what it would look like. But if we go back to the fashion industry specifically, I think we've seen a report by AII just recently and Fashion for Good that estimate the finance of about $1 trillion US dollars that is required to finance the decarbonization of the fashion industry. So the question is, of course, where will the money be coming from? And I think there's a couple of considerations to be made. So first of all, the net zero is the starting point. We're seeing that finance is increasingly looking to align, all financial flows with this goal. And I think we can expect that the climate lens will increasingly be, applied in these financial decisions. As you've spoken in your introduction of the panel, of course, acting on climate means collaboration between, the private sector, not just brands, but also suppliers and finance and governments in ways that has not happened before. Now, if we look at in terms of the percentages of where, who's going to pay for what, there's some analysis that has been done that around 30% of industry decarbonization, and I'm not just talking about the fashion industry here, could flow from corporations themselves, while government financing might support the development of immature technologies through co-investment. And of course, these are just things that have been looked at and analyzed and so forth. But I think we need to go back to enabling policies that could improve regulatory certainty, things like carbon pricing and so forth, and things that could transfer the risk away from.
I think we've lost you there momentarily.
Collaboratively, and in the fashion industry, you know that very well. There's a long a tradition of collaboration, but I think now we need to really be thinking about how can we collectively create a viable business case. How do we make sure that we are clear about the roles that we need to take? How can the brands work with suppliers to create the necessary incentives for this transition to take place as quickly as possible? And certainly, to conclude, I think for businesses and organizations to do this, we really need effective climate leadership. I think that we can begin and continue to implement actions and demonstrate progress. However, of course, as we all know, we need a much greater scale and a much greater speed right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindita. A follow-up question. That is basically, from ground reality and experience. We've had many funds internationally. I can name one, GCF. And what we have seen is that most of these funds that were allocated for countries like Bangladesh, where there is a need for massive investment at the supplier level, the fund could not reach the suppliers either in time or because of many other bureaucratic processes that are conditionalities which were attached to those funds. Now, it's very imperative that at the ground level, the manufacturers are able to access these funds because they need to make the necessary investments for greening. So what do you suggest can be done going forward in future to ensure that manufacturers have access to these funds in an easier manner, in a less bureaucratic manner?
Yes, well, I mean, it's a good question, and certainly one that we get a lot, especially in our conversations with fashion industry fashion industry charter signatories. And there's no such thing as one solution that will fit everyone. And of course, for each country, there's different parameters and so forth, and there's lots of bureaucracy and difficulties as well in terms of having access to that finance. I've mentioned the need for collaboration earlier on, and I think that there needs to be, we need to be thinking about collaboration in ways in which we have not done it before, because I think there's a lot of stake there and therefore a lot of risk. As I mentioned, we need to make sure that business case is there. It will be very difficult for any supplier to invest in renewable energy technology if the payback period is 30 years after that. So I think all these things need to be considered. There needs to be a closer collaboration between the players involved as well as the local banks, not only multinational and big investment banks. I think in the fashion industry charter, we have created something called Financial Tools Working Group, where we looked at these existing financial instruments and solutions. And what we found there is that the finance is only going to move if the demand is there, obviously, as we all know. So I think it will be important to really articulate the needs in these multi-stakeholder forums and make them as clear as possible to ensure that we can come up with some innovative green finance that will make better sense. And again, I think it's important to really clarify the roles of all these different stakeholders that are around the table and have them participate in order to get to the goals that we need.
Yes, we have innovative ideas like green exchanges, and bonds, and those are the issues that we can look into going forward. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's very early morning from what I can see from your background. Wish you a very good rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you, Lindita. The next panelist needs no introduction. He's an internationally reputed personality when it comes to climate issues, Professor Salimul Haq. Dr. Haq, Bangladesh have formed a comprehensive climate change strategy and action plan, which is called BCCSAP, way back in 2009, where we wanted to address the 6 pillars, which is food security, social protection, health, comprehensive disaster management, infrastructure, research and knowledge management, mitigation and carbon development, and capacity building for institutional strengthening. Now, that is at the big macro level. Coming back to the sector, the RMJ sector, which is one of the lifeblood of Bangladesh economy, as one of the major climate scientists of the world, who representing our country in the global platforms, what do you think should be the strategy of Bangladesh apparel industry to align with the ambitious climate action strategy of the global brands? And how can Bangladesh meet the target of the global consumers while the national emission reduction strategies have a sharp disconnect with the global targets? What customized policies can be taken for the industry by the government? I really wish today that the Environment Secretary should have been present here today. This is a very important session, and we are missing him, but hopefully the deliberations of this would be placed to him later on. But in future, I would encourage more government representatives to come in. So that was just my take. Thank you, Salim bhai.
Thank you very much, Asif, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. So let me start by saying that climate change is now by far the biggest global challenge for the whole planet. And we are not doing enough to deal with it. It's running ahead of us. And so we have a lot of catching up to do where governments alone can't do it. Everybody's going to have to be involved in it. And for a country like Bangladesh, we are at the coal front, the canary in the coal mine here. We are the sufferers. The impacts of climate change are hitting us as we speak right now. And so we need to be taking it seriously. In that context, the garment industry, the apparel industry has a very, very important role to play. Firstly, to understand, and I like the title of this session, Demystify Climate Change. So for many of you, this is a foreign word, a new word. You need to understand it. We have this thing called the 1.5 degree global goal. You may have heard about that. We want to keep temperature below 1.5. We are not on track to do that, but we can still get on track if we do our efforts. And that requires us to transition away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible into renewable energy. And we already heard from the chair of the BGMEA about a number of efforts that are being taken in Bangladesh by the garment industry in particular to put solar power on roofs. That's a very, very good way to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels and also promote renewable energy as much as we can. We have a land constraint in Bangladesh, but the garment industries all have roofs. You can use the roofs to augment your energy requirements. And we also heard about the large number of platinum and green factories in Bangladesh. So it shows the interest of the owners in investing in these new environment-friendly technologies. So that's number one. Convert to renewable energy as quickly as you can, and at the same time also do environment-friendly activities in saving water, saving chemicals, etc. So there's a whole host of environment-friendly actions that can be taken, are being taken by a number of industries, need to be taken by everybody going forward. Then there's another aspect to it, which is the fact that we are living in a very vulnerable country where your factories and indeed your workers and where they work are going to suffer the impacts of climate change. So simply giving them good labor conditions in the factory when they come to the factory is no longer going to be enough. We need to think about how to help them at their homes, on the transports that they do. So a bit more of a broader civic responsibility from manufacturers and owners towards the workers to help them with the impacts of climate change. And the final point I'll make, which you raised with our representative from the UNFCCC, there are new funds, climate funds available. And as you rightly pointed out, Bangladesh has not been very successful in accessing them. Let us work together to make sure that we can access them better. It's a different ball game. You have to learn how to play the game. Once you learn how to play the game, then we'll be able to access it. But we don't have time to lose, so we need to do that quickly.
Thank you, Professor Haq. As a matter of fact, it is true that we are not being able to brand internationally the achievements that we have already accomplished. The mayor in his speech talked about some of them. We have 160 green factories in our country. We have solar panels being set up in the rooftop of the factories in collaboration with ITCOL, SREDA. We have signed BGMEA with UNFCCC. We are a signatory. For the first time in the history of Bangladesh, 47 RMG units of Bangladesh published SDG reporting. That is also something which is very new. And we have BGMEA's own sustainability, which is based on GRI and which we strictly monitor and follow amongst our membership. So these are the good examples that we have, and we need to connect and connect the dots, as you said, so that we can make the financing available at the root level to the manufacturers. Thank you for your very precious and valuable insight, Dr. Haq. Now, the next panelist is Rene van Berkel. Did I pronounce it correctly, Rene? Thank you, Rene. He's the representative and head of regional office in India of UNIDO. My question to you, Rene, is that UNIDO has been truly instrumental in popularizing the concept of cleaner production. You have many projects, also in Bangladesh you have. We have done some tremendous work in terms of climate action through efficiency improvements. But when it comes to renewable energy, we are very limited to only the solar panels. How do you see the notion of renewable energy importation from neighboring countries? We've been talking about the water in the Bhutan-Nepal basin for a very long time. What else would be feasible for Bangladesh in terms of renewables? Because we want to think out of the box and look into new avenues. So over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're fine.
Yes. Yeah, okay. First of all, let me say that I'm absolutely delighted to be representing UNIDO, the UN Industrial Development Organization, at this third SAF. Mustafi's and Bangladesh Apparel Exchange leadership is truly aspirational. You put the bar high, nothing short of what planet and society need, but way out of the comfort zone of many in and outside of the industry. But the saying goes on, life starts at the end of the comfort zone. The world has changed and climate change has clearly come up since we last met. UNIDO looked at this from the perspective of how manufacturing will change as a result of the pandemic. And we see three drivers or shapers of development. First, we might say is globalization, so shifting away from the traditional value chains which we had, or we might say global value chains 2.0, where there will be more sourced outside from China, where there will be more sourced closer to consumption locations. And this is an opportunity for Bangladesh, I believe, and we see that already in the growth that have been witnessed and reported earlier on. So getting out of the shackles of the low-priced garment sourcing location. The second one is this digitalization and Industry 4.0, where there's the power of transparency, and we've seen that with the Higgs and others related there. There will be also driving sustainability initiatives. And the third one is, of course, green, the transition to a circular economy, a low-carbon economy. And let us keep in mind that fashion is not a negligible sector on climate change. The fashion sector globally is between 8 to 9% of GHG emissions totally. So 1 out of every 10 tons of GHGs is somehow related to the fashion sector. So in this area, and the previous speaker has highlighted this very much on the renewable energy and the renewable energy transition. But I would like to maybe, before coming to your comment on what can we do on renewables, I think for renewables, we need to look at a total spectrum of renewables. So putting on PV panels on the rooftop is a nice starting point, but there are many other options, looking at hydro and the integration, of course, in the region here for Bangladesh, Bhutan, and the other factors in the region. So power trade would be important, but we can also look at some of the other technologies, the abundance of organic material for bioenergy. We have abundance of solar radiation, so solar heat could also be utilized. But I guess from a perspective, if I may emphasize on this cleaner production extension of that, I think if we go climate action, there is 4 other actions which we could take. And I think that energy efficiency is still the underutilized, but it has many potential. And energy efficiency, we cannot stress this enough, but markets need to be developed. And UNIDO is working in some of the clusters, not in Bangladesh, but in India, for example, to see how we can assist small firms to access energy efficient technologies by focusing on things which are standardizable and then can be bulk procured and prices down. So in Surat, which is one of the famous clusters in India, we worked on PLCs, compressors, and other pieces of equipment. In 18 months, about 2,000 pieces of equipment installed, $1.65 million, payback 1 year, 840 tons of oil equivalent, 4,000 tons of CO2 avoided. So this is not a negligible opportunity. Then I think, and that comes back to your point, that energy efficiency is basically too narrow. We need to look at an integrated approach of looking at all natural resources, material, energy, water, chemicals, all to be addressed. And if we maximize the efficiency of use, we have less waste left there. So in Indonesia, we worked on this concept of resource efficiency and cleaner production. So 4 manufacturers, they save between $50,000 a year to almost $1 million a year. And then reducing specific energy consumption by up to 40%, which is translating directly to greenhouse gas emissions. And my third point is probably that innovation is the key. So we see that there's lots of opportunities for grassroots innovations in South Asia as well, to really harness the power of innovation on basically also established technologies. I give the example of heat recovery, which is as old as the Stone Ages, I would say, but we have just in India with one of the shirting mills enabled IoT system for waste heat recovery, and from effluent, from dying effluents, which everybody said was not possible, but is now being done. And we increased them 40 degrees of the boiler feed. We reduced the temperature of the effluent, so that's better on treatment, and there's lots of greenhouse gas emissions. And then the fourth point I think I would like to emphasize is that we need to see this climate action also in the connection of the transition to circular economy. So we need to think more and more on what are we doing with materials, resource efficiency, material efficiency. And in that sense, I'm pleased to announce that with support from the European Union, we're just starting a circular economy project with some of the Bangladesh garment manufacturers to look at what textile waste can be recycled back into textiles, or what waste from other sectors, PET bottles, can be turned into garments. So if we talk about climate, I think the sort of understanding is it's only energy efficiency and renewables, but there's many other actions that will help us to move into the direction of 1.5 degrees temperatures change only. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful insights from you. Is there time for what? I don't know. I still have 2 more speakers. We started late, so the timer has not been fixed yet. Yes. So the next 2 panelists are Noreen and Masarat. I'm going to start with Noreen. On a personal note, they represent 2 buyers in this country who we, as a company of which I'm involved with, New Age has been working for more than 25 years, I think. So first over to C&A. Noreen is the Senior Program Manager at Laudes Foundation, which is C&A's foundation. So Laudes has been truly instrumental in supporting many of the activities in Bangladesh apparel industry. You have also been funding organizations like Good Fashion Fund to create impact. To achieve the required goal of net zero, the industry needs finance, and a lot of finance. How do you see the investment opportunities of global investors in Bangladesh apparel industry to support the climate action pledges and the plans that needs to be implemented? What are the impediments that you see to adopt these? Over to you.
All right, thank you, Asif. It's great to be part of this eminent panel. And we've had the privilege of supporting Mustafiz's Bhai since 2017. And given that the first demystifying climate change is the first panel discussion topic, just shows the absolute imperative importance of this. I think in terms of context, Laudes Foundation, what used to be formerly C&A Foundation, was set up to tackle the twin goals of inequality and climate breakdown. We are, and I'll quote Dr. Haq on this, who I know at a personal level, is we are in the era of loss and damage. There's no turning back. And I'll also build on something Asif Bhai said, is Bangladesh has the homegrown indigenous solutions that we can teach the rest of the world. But to do that, we need a narrative. We need to change the narrative from one of vulnerability to that of prosperity and resilience. And I think access to finance actually came up in every topic, participant's topic. And this is something where we see foundations, not just governments and donors can play, foundations like ourselves can play a role in unlocking capital. Like Asif Bhai said, we have FFG here today, and we also have Good Fashion Fund that is part of the FFG in unlocking capital and making capital available. We see our role slightly a little bit at a meta level. In what does it mean actually in demystifying climate change? We see an opportunity in climate proofing our businesses and jobs. Laudes Foundation is working with Cornell University that shows, based on empirical data, that 55% of all factories in low-lying areas such as Jakarta and Bangladesh are going to be underwater by 2050. So what does it really mean for the businesses and the investments being made? We can make the finance available, but if we're not climate-proofing our jobs and the factories and the workers involved with it, we need an action plan on how to build a common movement around this, and what does it really mean to identify what's in it for us. We have labor advocates here. We need to make the labor movement, we need to combine the labor movement, we need to combine the climate movement. There's immense power in unleashing this in a way that we actually have formidable change, and in the process teach the world on what does it mean to tackle climate change.
Climate labor nexus.
Yes, very much looking towards everyone in this room to build a narrative around that.
Thank you, Noreen. Now over to Masarat. Masarat, you're representing one of the most strategic apparel brands of Bangladesh RMG industry, which is Hennes. H&M Group is also one of the most sustainably growing apparel brands of the world. Decarbonization is one of the major strategic importance of H&M. Having said that, what are the measures that are being taken by H&M Group to collaborate with the suppliers? And how do you see the role of incentives to encourage climate action across the industry in Bangladesh?
Great, thank you, Asif. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So to start off with, at H&M Group, we believe in having very big goals. And what we've done is aligned with the carbon law and set a goal of reducing our GHG emissions by 56% by 2030, and then becoming climate neutral by 2040. We believe in having big dreams and then finding a way to get to those dreams. And the reality is that 60% of the GHG emissions from our total system comes from, not surprisingly, either the material or the production. So in order to achieve our goals, moving forward with our suppliers is at the center of the action that we need to take. And actually, very reassuringly, we're very aligned with what our UNIDO colleague was saying in terms of the approaches that can be taken in the sector. Energy efficiency, renewable energy, and circularity are at the heart of the work that we're trying to do, both within our supply chain with our suppliers, but also at a policy level, because we know that there's certain policy kind of constraints without which, at present, suppliers aren't really incentivized to really make these investments. So this point that keeps coming up again and again about financing, we know that in reality it's not the availability of financing that's the issue in Bangladesh, because there's an abundance of financing, but it's a question of whether the right incentives are in place to really drive that. But let me just take a step back. On energy efficiency, we've been working since 2013 with a range of different partners, including PACT, SDWI, GIZ, 3E, NEST, and a range of other partners to really implement energy efficiency programs to drive reductions in energy consumption. In 2021, we wanted to go even further, and we've introduced an energy efficiency program of our own, through which overall our goal is to reduce energy consumption by 20%, by 20 more percent over the next 4 years. So that's a really big focus for us. Renewable energy is also an area that increasingly we're giving a big push on. As Selim Bhai said, at this point, it is really the solar rooftop solutions. And actually, there's so much to be done. And over the last year or two, we've been seeing that there's been significant progress. So we have, since 2020, had 12 megawatts of new solar rooftops installed. And actually, that represents 1% of our total energy consumption. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but actually it's monumental. This is the first time we've got a whole percent of energy that's coming from renewable sources, and over the course of the next few years, that will really dramatically increase. And we see that as a quick win. And in order to really, I saw our IDCOL colleagues a little while ago, but in order to really take that forward and make it possible for our suppliers, both in terms of access to finance, as well as access to technology, we've partnered with IDCOL to really increase the number of suppliers who are investing in those solar solutions. But in addition to that, on a very exciting note that you'll get more details later today, we have introduced the Green Fashion Initiative, through which there's basically about $500 million of resources that are available for our suppliers, but this is for innovation. This is really to fuel innovation and new ways of doing things. And there's a really good application through which our suppliers can really try and do things that are different.
Okay.
Can I just make
1 minute and then...
One more point about the renewable energy context. So it is just solar rooftops that can happen at this moment. And even then, as I said, the incentives are not really in place for that to happen at scale. So we do really want to commend the Prime Minister on her commitment to have a 40% renewable energy target by 2041. That now has to be operationalized. And there's a huge step between 3% and 40%. But we think that it's really important for Bangladesh to start taking those steps in a very proactive way, and that in the long term, that will make Bangladesh much more competitive. Because if we see what's going on in Europe at the moment, whether it's the textile strategy, whether that's the EU due diligence, and this doesn't just apply to European brands, it applies to all the brands who sell in Europe. So everyone who we sell to has to really adjust to this. And we think that the fact that Bangladesh is making this investment in lead factories and make these other changes will make Bangladesh much more competitive in the long term.
Thank you, Masarath. Yes, if there is political commitment from the top, Bangladesh can do it. Bangladesh is number 5 in terms of fighting COVID infections. So that is a lot. Salimba, you wanted to add something?
I just want to pick up on what Masarath said and go beyond simply the manufacturers in Bangladesh and what they are doing to the much bigger picture of the industry at the global level. The industry that we have today is not fit for purpose, all right? It is not going to continue. It is going to change in very, very significant ways, and we just heard from Masarath about some of the big changes that are taking place at the global level. And so I would invite organizations like BGME and the leading industrialists and those that have already invested in environment-friendly factories to not just be at the receiving end of buyers telling you what to do, but go on the proactive end and tell the buyers what they need to do and what we are already doing with our own efforts. We haven't done that enough.
Exactly.
We've done a bit, but we need to do a lot more.
Yes, we need to get these stories out internationally, absolutely. That concludes officially the panel, but however, I am told by the organizers that there is a polling question for audience. I think it's at the back of, there's a QR code at the back of your badge. So if you kindly, answer the questions. For session 1, the question is to achieve the desired climate action target for the RMG industry of Bangladesh. According to you, which are the top 5 strategic priorities the RMG industry of Bangladesh should consider? Options are A, available low-cost green finance, B, collaboration and long-term strategic partnership with brands. Oh, it's already up. Fantastic. So we can see that collaboration and long-term strategic partnership is leading by 79%, followed by reducing emissions, available low-cost green financing. So you can see it is collaboration that is the key. Collaboration, collaboration, and collaboration. And strategic partnership and a win-win partnership between the brands and the manufacturers. Thank you very much, distinguished audience. And thank you to all the distinguished panelists.
Thank you so much, Mr. Asif, for moderating the session so well, and honorable speakers for sharing your insightful views. I would like to request you to stay for a group photograph, please.